Well, good afternoon or good morning, everybody, depending on where you are. Welcome to this third in a series of 4 SESAR vodcasts on how we can build resilience into the system. How do we take advantage of the COVID catastrophe that has struck us, and what sort of changes do we need, and what is the role of technology going forward? We are today discussing very specifically the issue of technology, and we have and digitalisation. And I'm delighted to say that we have Klaus Meyer, who's the head of technology for SkyGuide. We have Ramon Tarok, who is with Indra. He's in Barcelona. I should add Klaus is in Long Island, so we're really going international today. And we have Mark Baumgartner, who is also with SkyGuide, but today representing not SkyGuide as much as the controllers. Mark has been a long time delegate for the International Association of Air Traffic Controllers and has a very fine grasp on the issues of controlling. Mark works as a controller for SkyGuide, as I say, based in their Geneva centre. And we also have Florian Gillamont, who of course is the Executive Director of SESAR. So as you can see, we have a very technically based group this afternoon, or in Klaus's case this morning. And Klaus, if I could start with you, the disaster has struck. The traffic is obviously down. We're all working night shifts all the time at the moment. From a technology perspective, from a digitalisation perspective, does this give us opportunities, do you think, or is it just scrambling as ever?
Thank you, Andrew. I think absolutely. The technology is probably at the moment pretty much in the center when you talk about how we respond to the crisis. I think most companies send their staff home and ask them to work remotely. And I see that as a perfect example that if we would not have the infrastructure set up previously, we would not be able to continue our works remotely. And that's for me a perfect example of how digitalization now in the normal infrastructure area has helped us to continue doing our jobs. And I think we also make a very positive experience with this kind of work. I have this real joke about you who introduced basically this kind of digitalization in your company. Was it the CEO? Was it the CFO? Or was it COVID-19? And I think the answer is very clear. The crisis forced us to work differently. And we have proven that from a technology perspective, we can do it. But from a SkyGuide perspective, we have, yeah.
Sorry, has it made us, for you as the Chief Technology Officer, I can see that working remotely is very obvious, but is it easy, how do your controllers work remotely?
Well, this is another topic. We are still in this mindset that air traffic management is a location-based business. And I think at SkyGuide, we started that journey about 4 years ago, seriously to say we need to move from a location-based business to a location-independent operation. As you probably know, we have 2 area control centers in Switzerland, one in Geneva, one in Zurich. And these 2 control centers are basically siloed and vertically integrated. And the same is true also from a system. I have 2 different systems that are connected, but not really from a digital perspective. So what we're doing with the virtual center, we say we want to become independent of the location Geneva or Zurich and being able to have digital services, so ATM services that can be provided from any place. And also the airspace over Switzerland can be managed either from Geneva or Zurich, and we can basically manage the airspace as if we would only have logically 1 area control center. So this shift from a vertically integrated location-based mindset to a horizontal networked approach that allows us to be much more flexible and much more resilient is the goal of the virtual center of SkyGuide, and we continue with that path with full steam. Even during the crisis, we had, you can imagine, also discussion with our owners and government, and they were in full support of that strategy to use the crisis to continue to invest in this kind of change in mindset, in this kind of paradigm shift. And I'm very happy that we get also the backing of the government to continue with this path.
Right. Ramon, that progression, if you like, from vertical integration to horizontal integration, if you look outside of air traffic control generally, that's the way the world is going technologically, isn't it?
Yeah, and actually, I'm happy to fully support what Klaas has been mentioning. Even from a technology point of view, what we do is we support the operational layer with the system, and basically we have two kind of services during the COVID. One is to support the maintenance of the system that the customers have, and the other one is the one that has to be doing with, as Klaas was saying, keeping up with the investment programs and not stopping the delivery of systems that we will be deploying. And during the COVID crisis, all what you were mentioning, can the controllers work from home? Yes, they can. They can work at least for validation systems. And we have had a couple of webinars that put with Canso examples on how, for example, the new evolutions of the ITEC SACTA system with an IRE have been going to be continually being deployed, and people were working from home, and we had the resilience both in the systems that support these processes and the products that are being deployed, and the people have the flexibility to adapt to these new circumstances. So digitalization is here to stay, and it really brings a lot of value. It doesn't substitute certain things, but of course, this is the way it's going. And for example, in the sense of the virtual centers, one of the deployments that we have done on an agile and incremental basis is, for example, with NATS, that is in a similar situation, to implement a private cloud to support both systems in Swanwick and in Prestwick, and this is going, and this is exactly the way that we can provide the resilience. But not only in the automation of ATM, but in the CNS services, we were able to validate and commission a 3D radar with LFB working together. The operational staff, the technical engineers, people in Spain, people in Sweden, and we were able to continue working. So absolutely, this is the way it's going.
This is okay. So Mark, if I could turn to you, is that of interest, do you think, to the controllers to be able to control their aeroplanes in their pajamas? Is that the way we're going?
Well, I don't think so, that we go this way. Now, meaning that at the global level, from a controller perspective, during the whole COVID crisis, the people had to go physically to the offices, to their offices, means the control tower, the area control centers. But there have been elements which, through creativity, through the crisis, were created, like, for example, simulator training from home. So the pseudo pilot, the air traffic controller student, and the coach were connected on a platform. So things like this, we would a couple of years ago, or maybe a couple of months ago, never have imagined that it would be possible. So why not having some sort of vision going towards something similar? But I don't think that this is for this generation of air traffic controller to stay at home and do it from their bedside or from their table side. But what I think is more important is that we are still working with a World War II technology, if you wish. So conceptually speaking, it's not the tools, it's not the computers, but from a conceptual point of view, we're still talking about a legacy system. And I think there we need to take this moment of crisis to reflect. Who would ever have thought that we have a moment to reflect what we're actually doing? And typically here, topics like digitalization. How do we bring digitalization into the sector? What are the best practices? Where can we go and learn? From whom can we learn? Do we need to remain in our sector, in ATM, or can we go to telephony or to airlines or things like this? And then what is useful from the digitalization? Because a lot is buzzwords, a lot out there is commercial activities, but not necessarily something which we do actually wish to have. And then one of the things we also should use this current situation to ask ourselves, do we need to have gold-plated ATM solutions, which we have been doing, because conceptually we're still in a legacy system approach, that the gold-plated solution for everybody, individual prototyping, is that something we need to continue to do? And I think here we should all together sit together and think, what can we get commercial off the shelf? So what is commercial off the shelf? Artificial intelligence, cloud solutions, sensors, and Internet of Things, things like this, where we could benefit. And what are the things we as sector need to keep and need also to continue to do the prototyping? I think this debate, at least at IFATCA, we have started in 2007 to bring this debate up and say, can we actually try to find out what is needed for the sector and what is actually what we can buy in from outside. And this is certainly not an easy journey. And that is also something which I like very much to bring in innovation. So we are in a research environment here with SESAR, making this digital vodcast possible. And I think this innovation, we also need to think what actually is accessible as technology, what kind of internal technology can we make progress, and where do we need to have fundamental research to actually bring in some of the potential from outside in to the sector. This will be very complex, but I think if we don't start now, we miss an opportunity. So if we don't start now, to ask ourselves, what are we actually doing? What are we trying to achieve? And how do we get there? If we don't start, we miss an opportunity.
So that's the perfect introduction for you, Florian, isn't it? Florian, do we need gold-plated solutions?
More than good afternoon, first of all, everyone, and thanks, Andrew, to animate this discussion. I mean, the question to me, more than do we need it, is can we afford it? And I don't think that today, with the current environment that we live in, the answer will be yes. I think that what the crisis will force us to do is to rethink our investment, and my plea is really to make sure that we continue to safeguard the investment into the system, despite obviously the treasury issues that the entire sector is facing. I believe we have to continue to safeguard investment to prepare our collective future. And as part of this, we need to make choices. And that's very clear that today the financial resources that we can have are very different than the ones that we had so far. And from that standpoint, I do believe that we will have to make some smarter choices in terms of which investments are required and what for. And indeed, maybe we have to go for things which bring maybe not the 100% value or requirements that we were looking for so far, but maybe 90% of it or 80% of it, and this will have to be the investments that we go for. I think as part of this endeavor, we have to focus as well on what will bring the proper performance elements that we are looking for. If I just look a bit behind us, about 1 year ago, I was participating to one of these famous wise persons group set up at European level, and the discussion was all about the capacity crunch and the need for capacity and why we need to invest into the system to develop capacity. Today, the debate has, for instance, completely shifted to scalability versus this whole notion of capacity. And what I mean by this is that scalability is definitely one of the attributes we need for the future system. And therefore, these are the investments that need to be made in this direction. Other, I think, key attributes are related to the resilience of the system. We need to build a system that is much more resilient at European level, much more able to cope with such situations. We have as well other elements like the environment, which are essential for aviation in the current context. And we have today maybe an opportunity as well to invest on solutions that bring significant value from this standpoint. So all in all, I think this crisis will force us to make choices. And to answer clearly your question, I don't think we need to go for gold-plate solution, but more importantly, I think we can't afford them anymore.
So we can't afford them. But I'm interested in the interplay between the scalability and the fact that, as you say, a year ago it was just throw everything at the system because we need the capability. And that sort of cuts across the whole issue of resilience as well, doesn't it? Or perhaps cutting across that is the issue of resilience. So Klaus, could I ask you perhaps, if it was your money, where would you be investing? Where would you be finding savings? Or getting what Florian called a 90% solution. I think it was Florian that said a 90% solution. Is that the sort of decision that you're going to need to make as a technology officer going forward?
Well, I would invest it in SkyGuide, and I would invest it in the ideas that we have to move towards location-independent services. And I do believe, I think we have to really look at where do we really go for innovation and where do we try to change the way how we want to manage the airspace. I think I'm fully aligned here with Florian to say we will have less money available, or we will check it much more closer than before, because I do believe we also have to stop wasting money. If you look at what we have done so far, we are still operating again very much locally, very much nationally, and pump hundreds of millions into assets and equipment, because that is how we define the value of an ANSP. And we do not look at what value do we create, what is basically the benefits for the customers on that side. And the perfect example is, for example, in the whole surveillance area, how we are still pumping hundreds of millions into systems that create basically a problem on the operational side. I just want to refer to the fact that we have these over-interrogation problems during quite a big white band in Central Europe. And why? Because microwaves don't respect national borders. But we are still optimizing on a local, national level. We still think very much vertically integrated locally instead of networked. And I think here we have to stop wasting money and shift the funds that we have towards real innovation. And real innovation is not pumping money into technology and say, look, do whatever you want, but is really saying, how does that technology support a different way of how we want to manage the airspace? We manage the airspace also locally still. We still optimize basically a sector, and we do not optimize, in this case, a network, like, for example, in en route. We also have not that many approaches how we want to deal with the international airports and how we want to manage the flow into and out of international airport. It is still very much local that we're doing. And I think we have to stop doing that. Local investments into local vertically integrated systems that includes processes and technology.
So Ramon, thank you, Klaus. Ramon, investing in horizontal systems as opposed to vertical, did I get that right? Investing in horizontal solutions, not necessarily systems. Is that an issue for the technology to solve, or is that an issue that the telecommunications people solve? I'm trying to work out what's the interface between a network solution and the technology that drives it. Where's the technology role in this?
I would divide the dimension in two sets. One is the set of automation, how Mark and colleagues want to implement operational concepts and how they manage actually the separation between aircraft. So automation goes in one end, and there let's say the technical difficulty to develop solutions for cross-border services is not really there. The issue is how the operational concepts of two adjacent ACCs can be merged together so that the technology supports the operation of the controller with the right solution, with the right tools. Not absolutely agree that this is not gold plating. This is not something technology. Operations and technology go hand in hand, and so the work is, if you want to think horizontally, we need, as the aerospace study highlights very well, take care of the operational layer as the first point. And if we want to implement value-added services for the airlines, which is at lower cost, cross-border services, all these matters require not only the technology, which we've been working in SESAR collaboratively across industry between the different competitors and newcomers, all together working with the NSPs, the operational industry, on how these solutions can be there. What I think we have failed in a little bit in the past is a little bit to be more agile, without losing the safety dimension, which is critical in the industry, go faster from the SESAR solutions that we have developed for the last 10 years almost, and the gap from the R&D to the deployment, we need to really close that up, and the innovation really drive it to the operation center, not just stay there. This is nice technology that would be nice to be operating it. The challenge is how we merge in a very efficient manner. And there probably what we are missing is a little bit this network level view that Klaus is saying. We need to have a program view of how this can be done throughout Europe, especially in the automation domain. And this is working at the resilience and the scalability we will be achieved if we work at the network level, and then maybe the institutional instruments that the Commission is exploring, such as ATM data service provision, that can come into play. But the first thing is really to have this wish to look into the problem borderless.
Thank you. I'm really interested in this. We've got the technology, we've got the solutions, we've had them for 10 years, or we've been working on for 10 years. But the problem seems to be in getting things actually into the control center. Or getting it into the procedures. I mean, there's only the 5 of us here, Ramon. Name names. I mean, who do we blame for this delay? You're on mute.
I think it's a little bit of fault of everybody here, but let's bear in mind that ultimately the responsible for the current infrastructure is Klaus and their colleagues around Europe. And in Indra we take very much a partnership approach. We see collaborating arrangements such as ITEC between different NSPs working together to try to put all this in place. I think that the NSPs, they have to cope with the traffic. They had priorities. Now is a different scenario, so we can maybe take the opportunity of the low traffic situation, which transitions. Escaping the legacy is not simple. And while I think that the other day, you changing the wheel of the car while the car is running is a bit difficult. I think that the other day Florian was saying in another webcast. So a little bit of that, a little bit of everything, and probably we need to be more ambitious to try to push these solutions to the sector.
Right. Well, that's really interesting. I was really hoping you were going to blame the controllers, because then I could have just gone straight to Mark and given him a hard time. But instead, he's pointed the finger at you, Klaus. The problem seems to be in the technology. So I'm sorry, Mark, I was going to come to you, but Klaus, you want to write a reply to that it's your fault?
Well, Ramon is not completely wrong, because I do believe that, and it's my topic usually is the incentives are not set correctly, in my opinion. Yeah, and if you look at the way how we at the moment incentivize investments, then it's basically CapEx that goes into equipment and assets, instead of going towards services and cross-border or network services. And so if I look at my colleagues around me, they sometimes ask me and say, Klaus, why the heck are you doing that? You're undermining your power base in your company, because your power comes with managing all those assets. All this equipment that you can invest for the next 10, 20 years. And now you say you don't want to have that, you want to use services. And I think there is some truth in what Ramon said, that from a technology perspective, we again think very much local, very much optimizing our little kingdoms that we have in our own companies. However, I'm also pointing towards the question of why is there not the right incentive to change? I come out of the airline industry, and I experienced deregulation in the airline industries in the 80s and 90s. And there was basically competition forcing the airlines to move away from having their own reservation systems and moving towards connecting reservation system and lifting the whole efficiency up by multitude of factors, by creating GDSs. And the airlines had to also change their thinking of what is their value creation that they did in the 90s. And I think the same we have to do as an ANSP. Our job will be to provide a service to our customers and not to maintain our power base. And I think this is one of the issues that we still face, because there is no real competition. Now, will there be any competition would be the next question. And my answer is probably not, but we will have new entrants into this market which would challenge us the way how we manage an airspace. And these disruptors, they will challenge us. And I think so I'm putting the pressure on operations and saying you need to change the way of how you want to manage an airspace. You're not controlling it anymore, but you want to manage the flow through an airspace. And there, I feel like that is the right approach, to set the right incentives so that we as CTOs are making the right decisions in what systems and technology we will bring in.
So thank you. I mean, of course, more competition would be wonderful. I'm interested. You don't think Google will ever be a competitor, but I think it'll be a disruptor. There's no disputing that. But Florian, if I can turn to you, the point Klaus has made that we seem to be stuck, if that's the right word, in little islands. Hasn't the COVID crisis made that worse? I mean, haven't all the border closures and all the very nationalist thinking that we've seen, hasn't that sort of retreated us back to our own little islands? Isn't that a risk that we run? And if so, whose job is it to try to get this network-wide approach?
Well, I think that it is a risk indeed, because we've seen a lot of, especially when entering into the crisis, we've seen a lot of, I would say, national approach versus European coordination. And I think what is kind of reassuring is that the exit of the crisis is going the other way around. We do see now back the need, which is unquestioned by any of the states, to cooperate at European level, because this is where we have a critical mass, this is where we have a market. And I think this is really why we have a program like SESAR, because things like air traffic management and aviation make sense only at continental level, if not at worldwide level. And this is something we very well know from years and years of work in the aviation domain. We do have to work together. There's no other option. So building national kingdoms, or whichever kind of kingdoms, has its limits. It has as well some benefits, let's admit it, in terms of being able to keep a certain level of control. But I think this is an outdated model. If we look at sovereignty aspects, because this is usually the type of, I would say, argument that is put on the table to say, let's do it at national level or at local level. If we look at sovereignty, sovereignty over an airspace today is not anymore about having a radar. When you have a satellite constellation, which is, by the way, controlled from foreign regions and not by Europe, that are basically acquiring all the data of the traffic worldwide, you can immediately see that this is false sovereignty that a radar is providing to you. We have to think in terms of digital assets now. We have to think in terms of who is controlling the communication systems. And if you start to get into this mindset, which is maybe what the crisis is revealing, that we have to get into a new mindset, then inevitably you end up with the need to build something at a European level, which is not necessarily in contradiction with local or national layers, but which has to be in complementarity. Again, if I look at the money that we throw today into the system on the CNS domain at European level, it's pretty much close to 1 billion euro every year that we are using to finance basic ATM infrastructure. The cost of a satellite constellation is probably around something like 400 million, and this is a one shot. So let's start to look at these numbers, and again, let's start to look at where we put our future investments. What I'd just like to highlight from that standpoint, I think what is essential if we want to make it successful and if we want to convince as well the decision makers and the governments about it, is that we need to think in terms of architecture. We need to have a proper blueprint in terms of architecture where we have the right thinking all the way through. And just to give one example, I was mentioning earlier on the 80% correct. Of course, if we look at safety critical functions, we have to make it 100%, that's obvious. But what is clear as well is that in our system, not everything is safety critical. We tend today, because we don't look properly at the architecture, to have everything becoming a big safety critical bubble, while actually we have the very core safety critical aspects. We have things which are business critical, and we have all the rest as well. Nothing forces us to look at reforming and changing the entire system at once. So we need to apportion safety properly in the architecture. We need to work on the architecture collectively so that then we can plug in the right components, the right services at the different level in a way that is manageable and that as well is meaningful for decision makers.
Hallelujah, I completely agree with that. I mean, clearly no one's suggesting a 90% safety solution. That would be a ludicrous thing to take. Mark, if I can come back to you, I was really interested that Klaus spoke about managing the flow through your sectors as a controller. Whereas a couple of weeks ago when we were in another conversation, people were talking about trajectory management, which I think isn't so much flow, it's actually end to end. Managing the flow through your sector still sounds quite geographically limited. Am I right about that, or do those two overlap? Which do you think is better?
Well, it's a bit difficult because, again, everybody understands something different when you talk about flows or trajectories and things like this. What, from an IFATCA perspective, we would like to see is a seamless, standardized, and interoperable system. And for that, you need a standard, and you need to tailor-make the investments where it brings you capacity with the needed level of safety. That is missing. Once you have established such standards, then you can start to talk about, oh, today we have weather in the middle of my sector, and instead of calling every time my colleague from France or from Italy, can I, with this aircraft, you see maybe fly through your airspace for 4 minutes, that actually these things become like one. And this is not really rocket science because our colleagues in the US are able to do that. So in the US for weather, you can actually reschedule the flows and you can reschedule the trajectories. So basically we need first a common, let's say, interoperable and seamless airspace structure. This is one of the things, and here I agree completely with Florian, that to look in an architecture point of view at these things is very essential. And also, you need to create standards, but the standards, they should be there like GSM standards. So again, to talk in very colloquial terms, we are still at GSM level 1, so mobile phone technology 1, but we are dreaming of the App Store. But for an App Store, you need a smartphone. And these are the things we need to establish actually in an agile way, or in a reflected way all together. We need to think on how we're going to make our phone compatible with the applications which are in the app stores. This is currently missing. And then be it trajectory based. That's the global concept of ICAO, be it trajectory based or flow based. This we will discover along the way we go. Because for the time being, we imagine, but once you have a common standard, once you suddenly say, oh, I have an application where I can make pictures, or I have an application where I can make a video on my phone. You don't need to have a camera anymore, and things like this. But this is evolutive thinking, and I think Google was mentioned before, and I would like also to mention one of the things Eric Schmidt said recently. He is actually looking towards a rivalry and partnership. So I imagine that something like rugby and Aussie rules, so that you try to be competitors, but you have to work together. And I think the have to work together is part of this standardization debate we would have to have. And then be it trajectory or flows, I mean, we really don't know what's better.
Don't get me started rules versus rugby interface, please. We have smartphones, though, don't we? We have smartphones already. They're called aeroplanes. Aren't they the smartphones in your analogy? I mean, Ramon, can I come back to you? Mark's saying we need common, seamless, interconnected, standardized structures. Isn't that the challenge for you as the technology provider that fits in with the smartphone that is our aeroplane?
Well, that's what we make our living of, which is resolving these issues. And this is what we are working on and we can do. But bear in mind that the word partnership, collaboration, is key in all these dimensions. For certain things, we really do need standards for hardcore things, but if we want an evolutive approach, agility, standards may compromise this innovation. So I think that we have evolved during the last 10 years quite a lot in developing the basic operational concepts we wish. Master planning sets the scene for what technologies we want. The ASS is a little bit the first structured approach of what kind of airspace we should Europe look at, and then the technology comes in. The technology can support all these aspects, but what is important, and the airlines one, is agility. So what we have in the pipeline of solutions that can be put in place, we gotta quickly put it into market or go forward. And and I would like to make a point that we can demonstrate this network level interoperability aspects already, and we can have demonstrators in place. And this is precisely what we should be doing now in the low prices. You cannot fix everything, but the people that want to innovate, the things that can be done, maybe not in the whole of Europe, maybe in certain areas, and we can put together and then roll it out. If we wait to have everything perfect, all the agreements, and then all the standards, 10 years down the road, we'll be still discussing. So the matter is agility and going forward. This is I think that Klaus was saying how we devise the legacy escapes and how we move that, and I think that this is possible, and we have to have a combination of bottom up and an institutional level support for this kind of innovation to build the resilience of the network scalable solutions. We can demonstrate those today. We can put it in several centers if we put together and have the traction into all these.
So my fear with aviation has always been that we tend to go top up and bottom down, but leave that aside. Florian, the one of the points Ramon makes, and I think it's a really good one, and as a point in the comments as well, is if we're not going to let this crisis go to waste, we've got a limited time. I don't know how long that time is, by the way, and it could well be 2 years. But how do we take the opportunity of the crisis, if that's not a contradiction? How do we take the opportunity of the crisis to make these changes? How do we drive this forward? What's the timing that we're going to need for this?
I have no idea of the timing, to be honest. But what is clear is that we cannot continue to deal with the timings that we've been having so far and the life cycles we've been having so far, whereby we take 10 years to develop a technology, 5 other years to standardize it, and another 15 years to deploy it. I mean, we see that this is a catastrophe everywhere. And I just like to pick on one element that Ramon has just mentioned. We need to embed agility into the system, not because it's nice, not because it's a new buzzword, but because it's just an essential thing that we need to build in. By lagging behind in terms of technology, we are as well creating our own problems. And this is what we need to tackle. So the need for speed, if I may say it like that, is essential for the future of ATM and for the future of aviation at large. And definitely the next 3 years have to be used from that standpoint. And what I'd like to highlight as well is that there are a lot of good things happening as well, which we have to amplify. Just in the introduction, both Klaus and Ramon have mentioned examples of what is going on right now in terms of validation activities that can be done remotely. I mean, basic training of controllers that could be done remotely. Just 5 years ago, this was something that was simply unthinkable. Just the word automation 5 years ago was a total taboo when I took my position in SESAR. So we are talking about all those things. It's as well because these things are not, future science fiction. These things are happening in different parts of the network, in different ANSPs, in different industry. What we need is to amplify this momentum. What we need is to build on it and to stop or remove the kind of blockage we have in the system, whereby we de-incentivize those initiatives instead of making them faster and bigger. So we need to create the momentum by pulling together those ones who want to move the system forward. That's what we are trying to do through the notion of demonstrators. It's really to amplify this momentum. And of course, we need to create incentive in the system where this behavior is encouraged, where going fast is encouraged, and where, to the opposite, you're not encouraging the last mover, because that's basically what we've done on examples like Data Link, where basically there were mandates, there were some that were late, and not only nothing happened to them, but on top of that, the European Union gave them money to catch up. This is really the worst incentive that you could create in the environment, and we have to revert it the other way around and to encourage really the ones that are ready to move faster.
The slow bicycle race of European ATM. I couldn't agree more. Gentlemen, we have 2 minutes left, so I'm going to ask each of you one last final question, which is, and I'll start perhaps with you, Klaus, if I may. What is the one thing that we can do that will help speed up in exactly the way Florian's been talking about? What should we be prioritising?
Well, I would say just do it. Don't wait for standards or any kind of excuses. Just do it. And I think, follow the airspace architecture study proposal, and then watch very carefully what we're doing here in Switzerland. Because I think we are on a good track. We can show that location independence is working, and that should give enough confidence to take that next step. Because I always say I'm solving a problem for Switzerland, but it is basically a European problem that I have within tiny Switzerland. And it is feasible and it is scalable. And let's just do it, and don't look for excuses not to change the way of how we want to manage the airspace. That's the airspace architecture study. And also stop rolling out locked, legacy systems based on an architecture of 30 years ago. Let's use modern technology. It is there, it is feasible. Check what we're doing in Switzerland, and then we can move forward.
Thank you. Ramon, what's your thinking? What is the one thing we should do?
I think that we gotta following launch the demonstrators for virtual centers across multiple states.
Thank you. Mark, what's your thinking?
Well, for me, we have to get out of this crisis with a common shared and agreed approach so that we sit together and say, what can we do? And this is very important for us, the controllers, that the humans are being taken with on this journey with the technology. We call it a joint human machine system approach. That's something I'm going to talk in another SESAR vodcast about it on the 22nd of July. I think this is the only way we can introduce the agility which is needed. The people are there, they're willing, they are creative. These are real assets. And only with them together, you will be able to translate a vision into an agreed approach to get out of this crisis.
Thank you. I always want to talk to you about how the controllers survive in the digital world, but yet again, we're going to have to put that off for another day. Florian, last word to you. What should we be focusing on?
That will be to encourage the early movers, let's put it like that, but to do that within the context of an agreed architecture. And I think from that standpoint, the airspace architecture study is actually setting a good basis, at least to start the first steps.
Thank you very much. Well, ladies and gentlemen, yet again, we're out of time and we could have gone on, I think, for another hour and a half. I think it's been a really fascinating conversation. I'm sure that you will join me in thanking Klaus, Ramon, Mark and Florian for this conversation. There is another conversation in this series tomorrow morning, where we're talking with the airlines and the airports, or an airline and an air airport, to discover what it is that they want and how they're seeing the crisis and how technology might help. I hope you can join us then. Thank you again for your time today and good afternoon.